Hello, all you friends of natural medicine. I am Dr. Krystosik, also known as Dr. J. And tonight, I'm glad that you're taking the time to be with us to take a deep dive into one of the most important topics that I think that affects everyone here on the planet. And we're going to be looking at one of the most important discoveries of the 21st century. And I can almost guarantee that your doctor is not talking about the things I'll be diving into tonight. And we're going to be looking at the microscopic world that lives on and inside of our bodies. And we're going to be looking at how the microscopic world holds the key to not only prevention, but also the cure of many chronic diseases. And we'll be looking at how they directly affect the length of your life. So if you like to live a long life, well, then you've come to the right place tonight. And we're going to be looking at how, surprisingly, the microorganisms living inside of your gut have an effect on your thinking, on your cognitive skills, on how your moods are, if you have anxiety or depression, or if you have a happy mood. It's going to depend upon those critters living inside of your gut. It also affects your skin, and it affects your heart and your liver and your kidneys and your lungs. Every single organ and system of the body is affected by the microorganisms living inside of your gut. So we're going to be diving into how your energy levels are affected by these microorganisms, and as well as your weight, the control of your appetite, how many calories that you burn, how many pounds that you either shed or you tack on is determined to a large extent from the bacteria that's living inside of your gut. My friends, this is a gut check. We're going to be looking at the microbiome miracle living inside of you. And this, again, is information your doctor's not going to tell you about. Not because your doctor's trying to hide something from. No, they're not trying to hide something. They just haven't learned about these things in medical school. And the big pharma industry doesn't want your doctor to be telling you about these things or share this information with your patients, because then you're going to help to prevent disease and you're going to help to cure disease, chronic disease. And they don't want that. They want you to be hooked on medications for the rest of your life. What I'm talking about tonight is called the microbiome, the good, the bad, and the ugly microorganisms that live inside your gut. Not only bacteria, but viruses and fungi and parasites and other types of microorganisms that are living there that release compounds, either good or bad, that affect your body's physiology and have a profound effect in health and in disease. So we don't want you to just get by suffering with going from one illness to another, just merely getting by. No, we want you to live independently healthy. And so that's why we're going to be sharing this information with you. And I don't want you to keep held in bondage to chronic disease. So if you're suffering with a chronic disease, there's hope for you. You know, I've seen over 20,000 patients, and many of these people were told they had to be on medication for the rest of their lives or had to have surgeries on parts of their bodies, surgically remove parts of their bodies, like large intestine, the whole large intestine excised, surgically removed, livers, literally to have transplant of livers, and patients cancel the surgery. People who are supposed to have gallbladders out and spleens, and their bodies are still intact, right where the good Lord intended them to be. So if this sounds like you or someone that you know or someone that you love or someone that you work with, then you want to share this information, because the power of natural medicine is what we're talking about tonight. The power that God has placed inside each one of our bodies. And we're going to show you how to unleash that through the microorganisms living inside of your gut. So, you know, the bottom line is we're talking about the microbiome, the critters living inside your gut. And So where did it all begin? Well, scientists back in the late 1800s started studying microorganisms in a very aggressive way, and they looked at microbes, as I said, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and they looked at the world of microbes and they studied these microorganisms. And it wasn't until the 20th century, though, that the researchers they began to look at the role of the bacteria and the microorganisms living inside of our gut. And that was in the late 20th century. Scientists started to use germ-free mice, and they transplanted these harmful microorganisms into these germ-free mice and started to watch and observe what kinds of consequences there were. And they started to collect this data, and these microorganisms they found that live inside of our gut release metabolites. These are compounds that can either be beneficial from good bacteria or actually deleterious, harmful from pathogenic microorganisms. So actually, it wasn't until 2007 when the Human Microbiome Project was actually instituted by the National Institutes of Health in the United States. And this was a monumental study that the researchers looked at, again, not only the bacteria in the gut, they looked at all the microorganisms they call the microbiota living on and inside of your body. And this was a huge research project. And they looked at the microbial communities that live in and on our bodies. And they looked at how they affect us in health and disease. And that's what we're going to be talking about, is that Human Microbiome Project and some of the subsequent research that came out after that. And that Human Microbiome Project ended in 2012. There was a very, very aggressive course of study and research that was done by these scientists. And they found some really significant things that I think will really interest you if you haven't heard about them before. One of the things they found is that we have 10 times more microorganisms, like bacteria, living inside of our gut. We have 10 times more of bacteria than we have human cells. That's pretty mind-boggling. We have trillions of microorganisms living inside of us. And these microorganisms, there's over 15,000 species of microorganisms that they have found. And each person has a different microbiome. No two people's microbiome are the same. And so we need to have a personalized approach for each person, is what the scientists are finding. And we can influence those microorganisms, how we think, how we move, what we eat, the critters that we live around and with. For example, if you have animals like a dog or a cat, the researchers have found this is a very beneficial thing to our healthy microbiome and the microbiota. It affects us in a very, very profound way. People who have pets, researchers have found they have less incidence of things like asthma and other types of allergies, which is quite interesting. So these microorganisms affect us in so many different ways. They manage how we digest food, how we absorb foods, how we burn calories. They also help to detoxify chemicals outside of the body, release these chemicals. They also help to train your immune system so that your immune system could react to the environmental insults or insults from microorganisms in your environment. These microorganisms help that. They affect our moods. These microorganisms, they release substances that can make us feel depressed or anxious or actually happy. We have these microorganisms. They also affect how we store fat inside of our bodies. So People who are trying to have ways to manage weight. Well, if you look inside of your gut, these microorganisms have a significant influence on the regulation of weight. Not only that, with blood sugar and blood sugar metabolism, and as well as the regulation of hormones in our body and inside of our brain. Neurotransmitters are affected by these microorganisms. You'll see some of the research studies that we'll talk about a little bit later in tonight's broadcast. So these researchers at the National Institute of Health, they made a final conclusion. And this is really profound. I'm going to read this actual a quote for what they said. They said the microbiome must be considered an organ in its own right. I'm going to read that again. The microbiome should be considered an organ in its own right. So what they're saying is these congregation, this confluence of all these microorganisms inside of our gut, they make an organ. They make up an organ like a liver or a heart. They have their own profound effect on every single system of the body. So these are groundbreaking studies that affect millions of people who are sick, they're tired, they're overweight, they have depression, they're taking medications, they're getting surgical procedures, and they have bloating and constipation and irritable bowel syndrome and diarrhea, and they've got all these stressors on the side of the body, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor may run some blood tests, may run some scans, and the tests come back normal. Have you ever been in that situation before? Maybe you know a friend or a family member who's had all these diagnostic tests. They all come back normal and the patient still feels lousy. And then what does the doctor resort to? Well, it says it's stress in your life. So the doctor goes and gives the patient some antidepressants. Or they give them something to treat the symptoms of the digestive disturbances. All they're doing is just treating the symptoms and not getting to the cause. Hippocrates, over 2,000 years ago, said something very interesting. He said, all disease begins in the gut. Now, who's Hippocrates? He's the father of modern medicine. Doctors, all doctors take what we call the Hippocratic Oath. And Hippocrates said, all disease begins in the gut. Well, his prophetic words are now coming to fruition through science. Evidence now is now demonstrating that what he said is with full accuracy. So, researchers are showing that the number one cause of disease, and doctors from all persuasions, whether you're a natural doctor or a conventional doctor, all doctors and all the research is pointing to one variable that's causing and triggering almost all chronic disease. And what is that? It's inflammation. We all agree upon the fact that inflammation is a trigger for chronic disease. Now, how we approach to eliminate the inflammation is a different story. The conventional doctor reaches for the pharmaceuticals to restore the balance and get rid of the inflammation, but we know that the pharmaceuticals have dangerous side effects. And so what do we do in natural medicine? Well, we try to get to the root cause. And we use food as medicine, and we try to help to get rid of the harmful microorganisms living inside the gut, because these microorganisms, they poop too, just like we do. They eliminate waste. And what do they have for their waste? Well, they're called metabolites. For example, one of them is called lipopolysaccharides, LPAs. Those LPAs, I could take a whole hour, and I probably will at some time, take a whole podcast and talk about the deleterious, the pathogenic effects, the harmful effects of these lipopolysaccharides. They damage cells in every tissue of the body. And these bacteria, they release these pathogenic bacteria release these things and cause inflammation as one of the symptoms. And so instead of trying to just put a band-aid on the inflammation with medications that the conventional doctor does, in natural medicine, we try to restore the balance inside the gut. We try to get rid of the harmful bacteria and replenish the good. And then we don't have those inflammatory compounds that are being released into the bloodstream. And then we have the symptoms go away without any side effects. And we cooperate with the body. That's the key. Now, we know that inflammation causes and triggers every kind of imaginable kinds of condition, everything from heart disease to Alzheimer's disease and everything between. And again, we have to look at where is the root cause. Now, let's start to look at some of this exciting research that I think you'll be quite fascinated by. The research is overwhelming. Again, this is a topic today that's one of the hottest topics in research across the whole medical community. Natural medicine, conventional medicine, everybody's looking at this because it has such great promise. Because if we can affect the microbiota that's living inside of our gut, then we can help to reverse chronic disease. And that's pretty cool. Now, in the area of obesity, let's look at that. Research studies have been published in a journal called Science. And what these scientists did is they took lean mice and they transplanted the poop, the gut bacteria in the poop, from the obese mice. And what do you think happened? Well, the lean mice became obese. Now, think about that. That's in a mouse study, yeah. But what's really interesting is the same researchers then actually found that there was some other people, and they took twins, and they took the twins who were obese, they took the poop from the twins, and they transplanted it into the mice that were lean. And guess what happened? The lean mice that had the poop from the twins that were obese transplanted into the lean mice, made the lean mice again obese. Now, what's really interesting is that when they fed the mice a diet of fruits and vegetables and whole grains and whole foods, even though that they had the bacteria of the obese twins inside of them, when they ate the healthy foods, the fruits and vegetables and whole grains and whole foods, they didn't gain weight. They didn't become obese. So you see, this is really significant because we have a way through the food. Food is the best medicine, my friends. And we've seen research is proving this every single day now, and it's exciting. So what about things like behavioral disorders, like mood, mood, mood swings? What about things like Alzheimer's and autism? Well, it's really interesting because researchers strongly suggest that certain bacteria play a significant role in Alzheimer's and autism. And what these researchers at the University of Southern California found is that there are inflammatory compounds that are released by certain bacteria inside the gut that can actually cross the blood-brain barrier, and they influence the production of neurotransmitters that have a significant impact on the social behavior and repetitive behaviors that actually mimic and look like autism. So they found that these microorganisms, these pathogenic microorganisms, released these toxic poisons and entered into the brain, and it disrupted neurotransmitters, causing the symptoms that looked like autism. My friends, this is exciting research. We have now the beginnings of a whole new avenue to take to treat behavioral disorders. Not only autism, but they found the same thing with autism and Alzheimer's. And they found that Alzheimer's, the researchers found that there was compounds that were released back by bacteria that triggered the symptoms that mimicked Alzheimer's as well. This is promising research, and we should be excited that we can have a dramatic effect on our well-being by the choices that we make, by the food that we put on our plate every single day. Now, what about autoimmunity? Autoimmune disease has become rampant. When I first started practicing functional medicine back in 1986, autoimmune diseases were rare. Today, autoimmune diseases are at epidemic levels. And researchers in the Journal of Cell demonstrated that there are certain bacteria that are released in mouse models. There are certain types of bacteria that are released that mimic proteins that look like part of our immune system. So they actually they actually replace the molecules that are supposed to be part of our immune system with these molecules from these pathogenic bacteria, and they trigger autoimmune diseases. Now, this is really an interesting point that they found in the science journal Cell. They found that these harmful bacteria that release these toxic poisons, they actually disrupted the lining of the gut of the mice. They damaged the lining of the gut on the mice, and they allowed the bacteria as well as the poisons or the poop from the bacteria to cross into the bloodstream, get into the liver, and then cause symptoms that looked like lupus in the mice. Looked like the autoimmune disease called lupus. They look very similar, the symptoms. Now, since that time in the Cell magazine, there's been a lot of other research to show that rheumatoid arthritis and inflammatory bowel diseases and type 1 diabetes even has been shown to be triggered by specific bacteria that are released from the gut inside of mice models. Now, again, we are at the young and the early stages of looking at mice models, but again, we're starting to see some very, very hopeful signs in human studies. They're actually finding that people with inflammatory bowel diseases and people with even things like type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes are actually starting to get some benefits from getting the healthy bacteria inside the gut and getting the metabolites from them and getting rid of the toxic elements from the bacteria that cause damage. So we are at a precipice finding that we are going to have new discoveries that people can get benefit by influencing the bacteria in their gut by the choices that they make. So the next meal you eat, the next thing that you put on your plate, think about what you're doing to your body and what you're doing to those microorganisms living in your gut. Are you promoting healthy bacteria or are you promoting harmful bacteria? And I can tell you with full surety that the harmful bacteria absolutely love. They love refined carbohydrates, white flour, white sugar, white rice, all the refined foods that are processed, all the processed foods, all those foods you walk up and down the aisles inside of the supermarket, those refined food products in the cereal aisles, in the cracker aisles, in the bread aisles, they're all refined, loaded with these refined carbohydrates that the pathogenic bacteria, they just thrive on. Again, do you want to thrive with good health, or do you want the harmful bacteria to thrive and cause disease inside of you? We want you to thrive and not just survive. Take control of your health, my friends. You have a significant impact. You can get health by making the right choices. You're not going to medicate your way out of chronic disease. This is not going to happen. We have 60% of adult Americans have chronic disease today. This is a sad state of affairs, 60%. So your doctor's not going to tell you these things. Again, as I said earlier, your doctor's not ignoring these things. They just haven't been taught these things in medical school. Medical school has little to no training on nutrition and the science of microbiome. They have very little training in it. And the pharmaceutical industry, as I said earlier, they want you to have more prescriptions, not less. So big pharma, they're going to profit when your gut is broken. They're not going to benefit when your gut is restored to good health. So thanks to the integrative Human Microbiome Project, we're now seeing a real explosion of research that is really showing how the risk for disease is determined by the food that you put on your plate, by the choices that you make, by the thoughts that you have, by the exercise. All these things, exercise affects the microbiome. It does. It's a profound way. Your thoughts affect the microbiome. So you have a significant control over your health and the choices you make every single day. We're entering into a whole new era of the microbiome, and it's going to be dictated by personalized prescriptions that is going to be affected by the choices that you make. Again, as I said earlier, one size does not fit all. Each person is unique, and we have to prescribe a regimen that's going to fit your lifestyle, your environment, your persuasions, and we can fit that, and we can help you to enjoy your experience in life, the food that you eat, your lifestyle that you have. We don't want you to be bored. We want you to enjoy it. And that's where we're shifting into. We're looking at a whole different way of living that you can enjoy. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be something that doesn't taste good. That old model of if it tastes bad, it's good for you. No longer, it's not that way anymore. We have gourmet chefs now who are focusing on trying to teach people how to make healthy foods that taste delicious, that are plant-based foods, rich in fiber, rich in very powerful nutrients and compounds that help to heal our bodies. And what's really interesting, there was a study in Nature magazine that showed that the microbiome, the bacteria living in your gut, it outperformed the effect that genetics has on our bodies. So what it's saying is that the old model of thinking was that our genetics determined the outcomes of our health. Well, that's not true anymore. The new science of epigenetics, including these studies on the microbiome, shows that the choices we make and the decisions that we make will affect things like the microbiome inside of our gut, which will then have an effect that actually trumps our genetic weaknesses. So let's say you have a family propensity towards lupus or rheumatoid arthritis or an inflammatory bowel disease or type 1 diabetes. The old model said that you had a significant risk to contract one of these diseases. And so most people just throw up their hands and say, well, I don't care. I'm just going to be headed for that anyways. That's not true anymore. We know, we know now that genetics only plays about 10% of influence on the outcomes of our health. 90% of the outcomes of our health is determined by the choices that we make, the food that we eat, the thoughts that we have, the way that we move. This is the science of epigenetics, and it trumps the old model that said genetics determine your health outcomes. This is revolutionary, my friend, and this should supercharge you with enthusiasm to take charge of your health. So we got to feed the good guys. And what do you feed them? You feed them with plant-based, fiber-rich foods. Fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds. And I'm not talking about nuts that are, just chock full of bad oils. I'm talking about raw nuts. If you're going to get any kind of oils ever placed inside your body, make sure that they're expeller pressed oils. If it just says sunflower or safflower or canola, don't use those oils. Those are heated to extreme temperatures, and they add chemical compounds to them, and they actually are harmful to our bodies, and they cause oxidation. They damage cells in our body, and they feed the harmful microorganisms. So stay away from those oils. Use raw extra virgin olive oil. Use raw coconut oil. Use expeller pressed plant-based oils like expeller pressed sunflower, expeller pressed canola, expeller pressed sunflower. Any of these oils that are expeller pressed are actually good for you. They're actually not processed in ways that are harmful. Now, how else do you feed the good guys? Well, you feed them fermented foods like dairy-free yogurt. I prefer dairy-free yogurt because many people have allergic responses to cow's milk dairy. Now, if you have sheep or goat milk yogurt, that would be fine because why is that? Well, because those animal milks are very close in composition in their nutrition value to human milk. Isn't that interesting? So sheep and goat milk and cheeses and yogurt are actually very beneficial for many, many people. But cow's milk, the yogurt, although some people can tolerate it, most can't, and they cause so many symptoms. And people are walking around having zero clue that their symptoms are triggered, whether it's in the digestive tract, or they're having migraine headaches, or they're having joint pains, or they're having fatigue, is coming from dairy foods. Now, you're not going to see a reaction to those foods immediately. It may take up to 3 to 5 days before you actually have a negative response. You could eat the food today for breakfast, and you may not react to it for 3 to 5 days later. So just try it for a couple of weeks. Eliminate all dairy, and you have to do it 100%. Can't be, well, I'll try to reduce it. It won't work. If you're going to do it for a couple of weeks and do it 100%. Be like a Sherlock Holmes, like a detective, and eliminate it and give it a try. But anyways, the fermented foods, the yogurt, the dairy-free yogurt, and the sauerkraut and the pickles and the kimchi. Now, when you get those products, make sure you get them from the refrigerator section, because if they're coming off the shelves that it's not refrigerated, they're not fermented. You want to get them in the refrigeration section. Again, kimchi, kombucha. Again, you could get miso, which is not refrigerated. That's fine. But again, all those other ones, you want to get refrigerated. And when you get the things like kombucha, get the ones that don't have any sugar in them. There are some out there like Synergy. Well, it has a little sugar, not much, but a little, but it's much better than some of them have per bottle, 25 to 35 grams of sugar. Not good. So get the ones that are made with fruit juice, much, much better. And then you want to repair the lining of the gut because that gut lining gets damaged by the harmful microorganisms, by the food that goes into most Americans' gullets, and it damages that lining of the gut, which then allows the microorganisms, pathogenic, toxic elements to leak into the bloodstream, causing things like autoimmune diseases. So you want to repair the lining of the gut. And how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to eliminate the harmful foods and just put in whole foods. And then go ahead and use aloe vera gel on an empty stomach. I recommend a couple tablespoons of aloe vera gel 2 times a day on an empty stomach, half hour before meals, an hour and a half after. Also take zinc carnosine. Zinc carnosine is a special form of zinc that research has shown has a significant benefit in repairing the lining of the gut. You could use herbs like slippery elm and marshmallow root. And these are herbs that help to heal the lining of the gut. Also, you could use turmeric and ginger. Those are herbs that are beneficial. Now, let me back up a little bit because if you are having problems when you try to introduce some of the fermented foods or some of these herbs and you're starting to get some gas or bloating, you may be introducing these things too quickly. Now, I know there's a lot of people who are prescribing the FODMAP diet for everybody who has symptoms of bloating and irritable bowel. And that does get results and people do see benefits. But I have found in treating over 20,000 patients that you don't have to go to that extreme. There's a couple of things that you can do that are going to be, in my estimation, much easier and cutting through the chase and getting things through, getting to the root cause much quicker. And so what do I recommend? Well, I recommend getting a blood test, personalizing your diet to eliminate the delayed food allergy reactions. And I have found if you get rid of those delayed food allergies, you identify it through a blood test, and I've tested thousands of patients with that blood test. Once we eliminate those foods, and it's only for 3 months, it's a short stint, you eliminate it for 3 months, and then you put them back into your diet on a rotation basis, probably about 95 or 98% of them you could put back into your diet. And when you do it that way, the symptoms that you normally would have with digestive disturbances, the bloating and the gas and the fatigue and all the other things, they quickly go away. And here's another tip. If you start to introduce some of these fermented foods, you don't want to do it too quickly. So start off by introducing maybe a tablespoon of a fermented food a couple times a day. And then do that for maybe a week, and then go to a couple tablespoons twice a day and do that for a week. And then continually to increase the dosage. And I find when you do it that way, you're able to tolerate it much better and you're starting to replant and reestablish a healthy microbiome to replenish and get that diversity of the bacteria inside your gut. So making sure you're getting good rest, 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night, and also doing things like prayer and meditation. Those will calm you and help to release the tension and the stress that so many of us are exposed to every single day in our life. But if you start to do some of these relaxation methods, you start to kind of diminish the stress, ease the stress, and you start to have more of an easeful and peaceful mindset. And that's what you're looking for. So that contributes as well to helping the digestive disturbances that many people have. Stress does play a role. There's no question about it. Now, I didn't mention that you should also be taking some supplements like omega-3 fats and flaxseed oil. That is high lignin flaxseed oil and omega-3 fats to help to reduce inflammation. And when you're doing that, again, you're helping to calm down an inflammatory response, which I talked about earlier is the number one cause of chronic disease. So work with taking the supplements, using the herbs, using the fermented foods, getting proper rest, and exercise too. Exercise is very important. And drinking half of your weight in ounces of water. So you've heard it before. Listen to your gut. Well, I'm telling you, take it literally now, because if you listen to your gut and you follow your symptoms with your gut and you make these adjustments and alterations, you could start seeing the benefit of how the gut health is restored, and you're going to help your body to heal itself. And that's what you want. Now, if you didn't know this, 90% of serotonin, that's the chemical in the brain, is actually produced in the gut, 90% of it. So again, this is how one way how the gut affects our moods, but it also has an effect from the vagus nerve, which comes from the gut and goes right into the brain. So we have this direct communication going on from the gut into the brain called the gut brain axis. So take care of your gut and make sure that you're doing the things that are going to help to regulate your nervous system through replenishing the serotonin and having that healthy vagus nerve function working properly. Again, that's where chiropractic comes in, because chiropractic affects the vagus nerve through adjustments in a profound way. So getting chiropractic adjustments as well. Now, whether you knew it or not, 70%, 70% of your immune system resides in your gut. So the signals coming from your gut are going to affect your ability to fight disease, to fight microorganisms that are harmful, whether it's, a flu virus, or whether it's a bacterial infection, or whatever it is, your immune system in your gut is going to fight those things. So you're either helping your immune system become stronger, or you're weakening and becoming more vulnerable to the microorganisms that we're all exposed to in our environment. Okay, so my friends, it's foolish to ignore the health of your gut. You've learned tonight about the profound effect that the gut microbiome has on your body. So don't wait for a disease to come knocking at your door. You don't want to wait. Take a proactive role. Start making the right choices. What you put on your plate at each meal is going to have a profound effect on what's going on inside your gut. So get rid of the stinking thinking. We talked about that. Accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. These are all things that you have control of, that have control over, and it affects your microbiome. Now, my friends, if you found this podcast helpful, if you found what I shared with you tonight beneficial, then I'm asking you to help to support this podcast by telling your family and friends about it, telling your coworkers about it, so that they can learn about this information. My desire is to help as many people to become independently healthy as possible. My whole world is driven by helping other people to learn about the power that is inside of our bodies. God has placed a power inside of our bodies to heal itself, and most people are not taking advantage of that. I want you to start to unleash that power, and begin by supporting the microbiome inside your gut. Feed that friendly bacteria. Give those microorganisms a reason to jump for joy. so that they begin to influence every single cell and tissue and organ inside your body. So once again, I want to remind you, education is much wiser than education. And that's what the other side of medicine is all about. Now, besides this podcast, I'm on social media. I have two different channels. One is underneath Dr. James Krystosik. The other one is underneath Gut 911 Prescription. That's GUT 911 RX Prescription. And you can I post 2 videos on each channel per day. So you could get valuable tips specifically on your gut, because I am focusing on gut health. I specialize in it and I dig into the research. Every single day, I'm studying the latest information to bring it to you, to your family members, to your friends, so you can take advantage of this explosion of research. You don't have to study it all the time. I'm doing it for you. And I compress it for you in little tidbits of information. Also, I have a quiz that you can take for free. And that quiz is on your gut health. And that I ask many questions. It only takes about 15, 20 minutes to answer the questions, but it'll give you a really good overview of what's going on in your gut. And I give you the answers and the suggestions on how to improve the weaknesses that you have in your gut. Lastly, I want to tell you about my Gut 911 prescription community. This community, in my estimation, is one of the most powerful tools and resources that you have available to you. What it is, it's a gathering of people like you and me who are interested in preventing disease and curing disease through natural ways. And it has resources in the community that are for free. There's lots of resources that are free there. I've got books and courses and recipes and tips of the day and all kinds of information that's absolutely free. Plus, there are people that you could interact with and you could communicate with and befriend. You know, when I first got into natural medicine, when I first got introduced to natural medicine over 50 years ago, it was through a community of individuals that we met once a week and we shared information. And there was a gentleman who was a professor at the college, at Hiram College, who would teach us, because he would dig into the research and teach us the latest information on health. And we would come and we would reinforce each other and support each other and encourage each other. And that's how I was able to evolve into becoming a doctor, because from that community of people. And we met for years. And I learned about all the natural things to help my body to heal itself. It all started with me helping myself. And that's what it starts with you. You have to help yourself. So take advantage of the Gut 911 prescription community. Go to my website, theothersideofmedicine.com, and there is a link on the website for the Gut 911 prescription community. Join it. It's free. And get the tips of the day. Take advantage of the resources. And I will see you in the Gut 911 community. And I'll be back next week here on the Other Side of Medicine podcast. Until then, my friend, may the good Lord bless you. Take care.